Okay, we're going to talk about compositions. Getting started in After Effects, the very first thing that we need to address is the process of creating a composition. You can't do anything in After Effects without a composition. A composition is basically your canvas and your timeline, the place where all your work will be composited, um, animated, um, and organized to create some sort of time-based uh, experience. So a composition is very similar to a sequence from Final Cut, if you've worked there at all. What else could I relate it to? No, nothing. Okay, a composition can be created in After Effects three different ways. It can be created by going to the composition menu. And right there, the only thing I can do right now, since I have a new project that's completely empty, is create a new composition. In fact, I can't do anything. You'll see that everything is pretty much blanked out because I don't have any work in this current project. So I have to get started by creating a new comp. There are other ways to get to a workplace by importing certain files as compositions. We'll get there later. So this is one way you can go create a new composition. Composition, new composition. It also tells us right here that the shortcut is Command N. And then there's a fancy, sneaky little button down at the bottom of your project window, which is the Create a New Composition button. This tends to be the place where I go most, just because it's right there and I can just tap that. But basically it's just the same thing as going here. So when you do one of those three methods, it opens up a composition settings window, and here you are presented with all of the attributes for the comp that you can alter. So first thing, the name. I'll just call this composition intro. All right. It's good to name things. Really, really, seriously. It's critical that you name things. Otherwise, you'll have a project that has, however many comps called comp 1, comp 2, comp 3, comp 4, and you're not going to know what's inside each one. So generally you want to be rather descriptive with your comp names. But right now I'm not actually creating anything, so my only descriptive tag could be that I'm creating a composition. So let me move on to all of this good stuff. The first thing we have here are different presets. If you take a look at the preset pull down, you've got different web, video dimensions, banner dimensions, then we get into NTSC formats, PAL formats, HDV, Real HD, HDTV, and then film. So they're kind of broken down into groupings. If you're doing stuff for television, traditionally in the past, everything's for us has been an NTSC format, which is pretty much getting phased out. We're doing a lot of work now under HD, HDV, TV, whatever. But a lot of the stuff that we do in Media Arts here is still an NTSC format. I like to encourage students to use the NTSC D1 widescreen square pixel. Basically, this is a widescreen format that's a square pixel aspect ratio, which works really well with artwork from Photoshop or Illustrator. It will translate well to HD. It'll translate well to NTSC format. So we're going to stick with this. And what choosing any of these presets does is it gives us a width in pixels and a height in pixels and a certain aspect ratio and then a pixel aspect ratio as well as a frame rate. So everything in this first little top area is all connected to a preset. If I were to change this to just straight up NTSC DV. My width and my height changes. My aspect ratio is now at 3:2. My pixel aspect ratio is a D1, which basically means I have rectangular pixels, but my frame rate is the same. I'm still in NTSC world. As soon as I were to go to PAL, if I was doing something for Europe or Japan or something like that, this all changes, frame rate changes, and it's going to work and interface great with, a client or whoever it is that's overseas. But this is all stuff that you need to know before you get started on a project. What are you doing? Where's your work gonna go? Where is it gonna be seen? How is it gonna be presented? Who is it going to? If you're working for somebody else, you got to get this information first. You never want to get started on a project, just be like, well, I'm just going to start under CDV and then I'll change it later. Absolutely not. You got to know exactly where your starting point must be at. So I'm just going to put it back to widescreen square pixel. Any of this stuff can be changed, and then that just automatically takes us to a custom setting, which you can save. You can save or trash different presets here. Resolution, we'll get into this later. This isn't really a place where we need to deal with resolution. There's a much better place for us to work with that. Start time code, never really need to worry about that unless you're instructed to by a producer or something. And then the duration. The composition duration is set when you make your composition. If you've ever edited in Final Cut, you should be familiar with the fact that a sequence will just keep growing as you add material to it. So if you added a minute and a half long audio track to a sequence, now that sequence is going to accommodate that length. But here, you're basically saying, well, I'm going to target a certain duration, and that's what I think I'm going to need, but you can always come back and change these things. Most of the projects that you'll be doing in class are going to be 10 seconds long. You'll probably be doing some exercises in class that are about 5 seconds long, but 10 is good enough. So this is the duration, and it's presented to us in time code, which is read from right to left. And the way that we read it is that we have frames, and then seconds, and then minutes and hours. So if you want 10 seconds, you got to put it in this second grouping of numbers to the right. Frames basically are determined by your frame rate. So I have a frame rate of 29.97, which is rounded up really to 30. So for every 30 frames I have here, that'll be 1 second. So if I were to enter just 30 in the frames field here, it'll just automatically transfer to 1 second. In fact, I'll do this. I'll just select all this and just do 30. As soon as I hit tab, it just says, oh yeah, 30 frames, that's 1 second. So there's 1 second. If you're working in time code and you want to just do it quickly without having to go and like kind of click and select that certain value right there, highlight it, and then type it in, just select it all and just type in your the duration. Just remember that you basically type it how you see it. So if I want 10 seconds, I'm going to type 10 for 10 seconds and then 00 for no frames, and then as soon as I hit tab, it'll say, oh, it's 10 seconds. The very last thing we have to work with here is our background color. This does not exist in this window for previous versions of After Effects. This is the CS5 thing, which is new. It's a great change. I can't believe it took them 10 versions of After Effects to get it here, but you always have to go someplace else to do this. But this basically presents the artist with a background color that isn't a layer, but it's like a starting point for a color. It could just be a reference color so that you have certain things like text or special effects stand out on a black screen. Generally, it's black because a TV that has, or monitor that is turned off, or it has no no light generated from its pixels is going to be black. And then the light that is generated from pixels, say it's a a title or something like that, then that's where the light comes in. You can get a good reference for how your work is looking. It still becomes transparent if you want it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it black, but if you were to change it, you could just click on it, a color picker comes up. You can pick any color you want. But I'm going to stay with black. Okay, and then I'm going to hit OK, and now what I have is I have one item in my project bin. I can see that I have this big black screen in my composition window, and I have a tab in my timeline window which is called Composition Intro. And if I take a look around, this little, come here, there we go. This composition in my project bin is called Composition Intro. This tab up here is telling me I'm looking at Composition Intro, and then the tab down here says Composition Intro. It's all connected. So as soon as you double click and open up a comp, it presents you with the visual of it in the composition window, and then it gives you your timeline for that down in your timeline. In order for me to make any changes to an existing comp, you have to select it in your project window or have the tab for that comp active in the timeline. Eventually you'll have many comps open and they'll all just be different tabs right here along this area. And if you want to get access to one, you just click on it. When it is selected, it's highlighted in yellow. Then you can come up to your composition menu, and instead of going to new composition, you go to composition settings, and that will open up the settings window for that comp. And this is where you could come say, oops, I didn't realize that I typed in a minute instead of 10 seconds, or I need to add more time, or I got to change my background color, or my format is possibly wrong. So you can go back and change any of that stuff at any time throughout your work, but you want to be very careful about what it is that you change, depending on how far into a project you might be. I'll just hit cancel. All right, so that's compositions. Next, we'll deal with layers.